I was standing at my front window in early November, watching the first real snowfall of the season blanket our suburban Colorado neighborhood in Monument, when I realized I was going to need those reflective snow stakes sooner rather than later. My driveway curved sharply from the street, and every winter the snowplows would clip the edge of my lawn because they couldn't see where the pavement ended and my property began. I had learned that lesson the hard way my first winter here, when I spent $200 repairing the damage to my sprinkler system. The next day, I drove to the hardware store and bought a box of 4-foot-tall reflective stakes with bright orange tops. Nothing fancy, just standard road safety markers that thousands of homeowners in Colorado used every winter. I spent an hour that afternoon positioning them along the curve of my driveway, spacing them about 6 feet apart so the snowplow drivers would have a clear visual guide. The reflective strips caught the late afternoon sun, and I felt satisfied knowing I had taken a practical step to protect my property. 3 days later, I found the letter in my mailbox. It was printed on cream-colored cardstock with an embossed logo at the top that read, Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I recognized it immediately as the kind of correspondence I had learned to dread in the 2 years since I had moved into this neighborhood. The HOA here was notorious for its nitpicking rules and aggressive enforcement, but I had managed to stay mostly under their radar by keeping my lawn trimmed and my trash cans out of sight. I opened the letter while still standing at the mailbox, and my stomach dropped as I read the first paragraph. It was a violation notice, citing Section 7.3 of the HOA covenants, which apparently prohibited unsightly markers, posts, stakes, or similar installations visible from the street without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. The letter informed me that I had 7 days to remove the offending stakes or face a fine of $50 per day. I stood there in the cold, reading the letter twice to make sure I understood it correctly. They were seriously trying to fine me for safety equipment. The stakes were literally designed to prevent property damage and keep snowplow drivers safe. I had seen them on dozens of driveways throughout Monument and the surrounding areas. This was absurd. I went inside and called my neighbor, Derek Morrison, who had lived in Meadowbrook Estates for 6 years and seemed to know all the ins and outs of dealing with the HOA. He answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear his kids yelling in the background. "Hey, Carter," he said. "What's up?" "Did you get a letter from the HOA about driveway markers?" I asked. "No, why? What did they do now?" I explained the situation, and Derek let out a long whistle. "That's Patricia Hendricks for you. She's the head of the Architectural Review Committee, and she's been on a power trip lately. Last month she tried to fine the Johnsons for having a basketball hoop in their driveway. Can she actually enforce this?" I asked. "These stakes are for safety." "She'll try," Derek said. "The HOA covenants here are pretty broad, and Patricia interprets them however she wants. You could fight it, but most people just give in because it's not worth the hassle." I thanked Derek and hung up, feeling frustrated. I pulled up the HOA covenants on my computer and scrolled through the dense legal language until I found Section 7.3. It was vaguely worded as Derek had warned, and could theoretically be interpreted to include my stakes. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This was not about aesthetics or property values. This was about actual safety. I decided to do some research. I started with the El Paso County Road and Bridge Department, which was responsible for snow removal on our street. After being transferred twice, I reached a supervisor named Miguel Santos who listened patiently as I explained the situation. "So your HOA is trying to make you remove the stakes?" Miguel asked, sounding surprised. "That's what they're saying." Well, that's interesting because we actually encourage homeowners to use driveway markers, Miguel said. In fact, on roads like yours where there are sharp curves and limited visibility, we consider them a safety requirement. Let me pull up your address real quick. I heard typing on the other end of the line, and then Miguel made a thoughtful sound. Yeah, you're on Ridgeview Drive, right? That whole section is classified as a medium-risk snow removal zone because of the curves and the narrow shoulders. We have 3 documented incidents in the past 5 years of snowplows causing property damage in your neighborhood specifically because homeowners did not have adequate driveway markers. So the county actually wants these stakes in place? I asked, feeling a spark of hope. Absolutely. In fact, I can send you a formal letter stating that reflective driveway markers are required by county road safety guidelines for your address. That should carry more weight than whatever your HOA is claiming. I could have hugged Miguel through the phone. He took my email address and promised to send the letter within 24 hours. I thanked him profusely and hung up feeling much better about the situation. The letter arrived in my inbox the next morning. It was official, complete with the county seal and Miguel's signature, clearly stating that reflective driveway markers were strongly recommended and considered a necessary safety measure for addresses on Ridgeview Drive and similar roads within the county. Miguel had even included references to specific county ordinances related to winter road safety. I printed 3 copies of the letter, one for my records, one to send to the HOA, and one to keep in my car just in case. Then I drafted a response to Patricia Hendricks and the Architectural Review Committee. I kept it professional but firm, explaining that the stakes were required safety equipment per county guidelines and that I would not be removing them. I attached Miguel's letter and dropped the whole package in the mail that afternoon. I expected that to be the end of it. I was wrong. 4 days later, I came home from work to find a bright orange sticker on my front door. It was another violation notice, this one even more aggressive than the first. According to the sticker, I was now in continued non-compliance, and the daily fines would begin immediately. The sticker also warned that the HOA had the authority to enter my property and remove the stakes themselves, with the cost of removal added to my account. I stood on my porch, staring at the orange sticker, and felt my blood pressure rising. This was escalating way beyond what I had anticipated. I pulled out my phone and took several pictures of the sticker, then carefully peeled it off and brought it inside. I needed legal advice. I spent the evening researching HOA attorneys in the Colorado Springs area and found a firm that specialized in homeowner disputes. The next morning, I called and spoke with a lawyer named Jennifer Wu. She listened to my story and asked to see all the correspondence, which I emailed to her immediately. Jennifer called me back that afternoon. "This is an interesting case," she said. "The HOA is on shaky ground here. Generally speaking, HOA covenants cannot supersede county safety requirements. The fact that you have written documentation from the county stating that these markers are necessary for road safety gives you a very strong position." "So what should I do?" I asked. "I would recommend sending a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA. Making it clear that you will not remove the stakes and that any attempt to fine you or enter your property to remove them will result in legal action. I can draft that letter for you if you would like to retain my services." The retainer fee was $800, which made me wince, but I was not about to let Patricia Hendricks and her committee bully me into compromising safety. I gave Jennifer the go-ahead, and she had the letter drafted and sent within 2 days. The letter was thorough and professional, laying out the legal issues with the HOA's position and warning them that they were opening themselves up to liability if they prevented me from maintaining proper safety measures on my property. Jennifer cited several relevant Colorado statutes and included copies of both Miguel's letter and the county ordinances. I thought that would be the end of it. Again, I was wrong. The following week, I received a notice that I was being summoned to a hearing before the HOA Board of Directors. The hearing was scheduled for the third Tuesday of November at 7 in the evening at the community center. According to the notice, the purpose of the hearing was to address ongoing covenant violations and determine appropriate enforcement measures. I called Jennifer immediately. "They're not backing down," I said, reading her the notice. "Then we'll go to the hearing and make our case," Jennifer said calmly. "I'll attend with you. These hearings can get contentious, but we have the facts and the law on our side. Let them hear why they're wrong." The week leading up to the hearing was tense. I found myself constantly checking the stakes to make sure they were still there, half expecting the HOA to make good on their threat to remove them. I also started talking to my neighbors, trying to gauge how much support I might have. Most of them were sympathetic but reluctant to get involved. The HOA had a reputation for retaliating against homeowners who caused trouble. Derek was more supportive. "I'll come to the hearing," he offered. "I've got stakes on my driveway too, and if they're going after you, I might be next." Besides, Patricia needs someone to stand up to her. She's been running this neighborhood like her personal fiefdom for too long. I appreciated Derek's willingness to back me up, but I told him he did not have to put himself in the line of fire. He insisted, though, and I was grateful to know I would have at least one friendly face in the room. The night of the hearing arrived cold and clear. I dressed in business casual, wanting to look professional and serious. Jennifer met me in the parking lot of the community center, carrying a leather briefcase stuffed with documents. Derek pulled up a few minutes later, and the three of us walked in together. The community center was a bland, utilitarian building with beige walls and fluorescent lighting. The main room had been set up with a long table at the front where the board members sat, and several rows of folding chairs for attendees. There were already about a dozen people in the room, most of them other homeowners who had come either to watch the spectacle or because they had their own issues with the HOA. Patricia Hendricks sat in the center of the table, flanked by 4 other board members. She was exactly what I had expected. A woman in her early 50s with a severe bob haircut and a pinched expression that suggested she had been sucking on a lemon. She wore a navy blazer and pearls, and she regarded me with the kind of cold disdain usually reserved for people who kick puppies. Next to her was Gary Whitman, the HOA president, a balding man in his 60s who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The other board members were 2 women and 1 man, all middle-aged, all looking vaguely uncomfortable. Gary called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. There were a few preliminary items on the agenda, including a discussion of pool maintenance costs and a complaint about someone's barking dog. I sat through these items feeling increasingly anxious, watching Patricia make notes on a yellow legal pad and occasionally whisper to the board member on her left. Finally, Gary cleared his throat and said, "Next item. Covenant violation hearing for Carter Lawson, 2847 Ridgeview Drive, regarding unauthorized installation of driveway markers." I stood up, and Jennifer stood with me. We walked to the front of the room, and Jennifer placed her briefcase on a small side table. "Good evening," Jennifer said, her voice clear and confident. "I'm Jennifer Wu, representing Mr. Lawson. We're here tonight to address what we believe is an improper and potentially illegal violation notice issued by the Architectural Review Committee." Patricia's expression did not change, but I saw her grip her pen a little tighter. Jennifer continued, Mr. Lawson installed reflective driveway markers on his property in accordance with El Paso County road safety guidelines. These markers are not decorative. They serve a critical safety function by helping snowplow drivers identify the boundaries of the driveway, thereby preventing property damage and protecting public safety. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, handing copies to each board member. What you have in front of you is a letter from Miguel Santos, a supervisor with the El Paso County Road and Bridge Department, explicitly stating that reflective driveway markers are required safety equipment for Mr. Lawson's address. You'll also find copies of relevant county ordinances that support this position. Gary flipped through the documents, frowning. The other board members did the same. Patricia did not look at the papers at all. She kept her eyes fixed on Jennifer. "That's all very interesting," Patricia said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But county guidelines do not supersede our covenants. This community has standards, and those standards exist to maintain property values for everyone. If we allow Mr. Lawson to install whatever he wants on his property without approval, what's to stop everyone else from doing the same? Before you know it, we'll have plastic flamingos and garden gnomes everywhere." Jennifer did not miss a beat. "With respect, Miss Hendricks, county safety requirements absolutely supersede HOA covenants. Colorado law is very clear on this point. An HOA cannot enforce rules that conflict with state or county regulations, particularly when those regulations relate to public safety. If this board attempts to fine Mr. Lawson or remove his safety equipment, you will be exposing the association to significant legal liability." Patricia's face flushed red. "Are you threatening this board?" "I'm informing this board of the legal reality," Jennifer said calmly. "Mr. Lawson has a right to maintain safety equipment on his property. If you interfere with that right, he will have grounds to sue the association for damages, legal fees, and potentially punitive damages if the court finds that your actions were willful and reckless." The room was silent. Gary shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at the other board members. One of the women, a brunette whose name tag reads Susan, raised her hand tentatively. "Can I ask a question?" Susan said. "If the county says these markers are required, and we force Mr. Lawson to remove them, could we be held liable if there's an accident or property damage?" Jennifer nodded. "That's a very good question, and the answer is yes. If a snowplow damages Mr. Lawson's property because he was forced to remove safety equipment, the association could be found negligent. The same applies if a snowplow driver is injured because of inadequate safety markers." I saw Gary's face go pale. He looked at Patricia, who was glaring at Susan like she had committed treason. "This is ridiculous," Patricia said. "We have rules for a reason. If people don't like the rules, they can move somewhere else." "The rules have to be legal," Jennifer countered, "and this one isn't." Derek, who had been sitting quietly in the audience, suddenly stood up. "I'd like to say something if I can." Gary looked surprised but nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Morrison." Derek walked to the front of the room, standing next to me. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 6 years, and I've watched this HOA become more and more unreasonable. Patricia, you fine people for having the wrong color mailbox, for parking in their own driveway during the day, for having holiday decorations up one day past your arbitrary deadline. And now you're going after Carter for trying to protect his property and keep snowplow drivers safe. This is insane." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Mr. Morrison, you are out of order." "No, you're out of order," Derek shot back. "You've been using this HOA as your own personal power trip, and people are sick of it. Carter is right, and you know it. The county says these stakes are necessary. That should be the end of the discussion. Several people in the audience murmured in agreement. I saw a few heads nodding. Patricia looked furious, but Gary held up a hand. "All right, everyone calm down," Gary said. He looked tired. "This is clearly a complicated issue, and I think the board needs to consult with our attorney before we make any decisions. I'm going to table this matter until our next meeting." "We don't need to consult an attorney," Patricia snapped. "The covenants are clear." "Patricia, we're consulting the attorney," Gary said firmly, with a note of steel in his voice that surprised me. "This meeting is adjourned." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but Gary was already gathering his papers. The other board members stood up, looking relieved to escape. I thanked Jennifer, and she told me she would follow up with the board's attorney directly. As people filed out of the room, several neighbors stopped to shake my hand or pat me on the back. An older man named Frank told me he had been fined 3 times in the past year for various petty violations, and was glad someone was finally standing up to Patricia. A young woman named Amy said she had been thinking about moving because of the HOA drama, but seeing this fight gave her hope that things might change. Derek and I walked out together, and he clapped me on the shoulder. "That went better than I expected," he said. "Did you see Patricia's face when Jennifer mentioned liability?" I laughed, feeling some of the tension drain away. Gary looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Good. Maybe he'll finally grow a spine and rein Patricia in. Over the next week, things were quiet. I did not hear anything from the HOA, and no more violation notices appeared. I kept checking my email obsessively, waiting for some kind of update. Jennifer told me that was normal. These things took time, and the board was probably scrambling to figure out their next move. Then, on a Friday afternoon, I came home to find 2 of my stakes missing. I walked the length of my driveway twice, thinking maybe I had miscounted or misremembered where I had placed them. But no, 2 stakes were definitely gone. The holes where they had been were clearly visible in the partially frozen ground. I immediately called Jennifer. "Someone removed 2 of my stakes," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "This happened sometime today while I was at work." "Do you have any proof of who did it?" Jennifer asked. "No, but who else would it be? The HOA threatened to remove them if I didn't comply." "Okay, here's what you need to do. File a police report immediately. This is theft and potentially trespassing. Then document everything. Take pictures of where the stakes were removed. Check if any of your neighbors have security cameras that might have caught something. I'll send another letter to the HOA, but we need to create a paper trail showing that they're continuing to harass you, despite being warned of the legal consequences." I hung up and called the Monument Police Department. An officer named Tom Brewer arrived about an hour later, a stocky man in his 40s with a no-nonsense attitude. I showed him where the stakes had been removed and explained the ongoing dispute with the HOA. Officer Brewer took notes and walked the perimeter of my property examining the damage. "Do you have any security cameras?" he asked. "No, I keep meaning to install some, but I haven't gotten around to it." "You should. These HOA disputes can get nasty." He handed me a case number and told me he would include the theft in his report. "I'll also drive by a few times over the next week, just to make sure no one else is messing with your property." I thanked him and went inside to email Jennifer with an update. Then I drove to the hardware store and bought replacement stakes, along with a basic home security camera system. I spent the rest of the evening installing the cameras, positioning them to cover my driveway and front yard. The next morning, I replaced the missing stakes and sent the HOA another certified letter documenting the theft and warning them that any further interference would result in immediate legal action. 3 days later, I got a call from Gary Whitman. "Carter, "This is Gary from the HOA board," he said, sounding exhausted. "I wanted to reach out to you directly because this situation has gotten out of hand." "You mean the part where someone stole my property?" I said, not bothering to hide my irritation. "I understand you're upset, and you have every right to be. I want you to know that the board did not authorize anyone to remove your stakes. If someone did that, it was not sanctioned by us." "Then who did it?" Gary hesitated. "I can't say for certain, but I have my suspicions." "Look, I've talked to our attorney, and she agrees with your lawyer. We can't force you to remove safety equipment that's required by the county. I'm recommending to the board that we drop the violation and clear any fines from your account." I felt a surge of relief, but I kept my tone cautious. "What about Patricia? Is she going to accept that?" Another hesitation. "Patricia has stepped down from the Architectural Review Committee. The board voted yesterday to restructure the committee and limit its authority. We've had too many complaints, and this situation with your stakes was the final straw." I was stunned. She stepped down. Let's just say she was strongly encouraged to do so. The board is tired of the negative attention and the potential legal liability. We're going to be implementing some changes to how we handle covenant enforcement going forward. We talked for a few more minutes, and Gary assured me that I would receive written confirmation that the violation had been dropped. He also apologized for the stress and inconvenience, which I appreciated even if it felt a bit inadequate given everything that had happened. I called Jennifer with the update, and she was pleased but cautious. "Get everything in writing before you celebrate," she advised. "And keep those cameras running. Just because Patricia stepped down doesn't mean she's going to let this go quietly." Jennifer's caution turned out to be warranted. 2 nights later, my security cameras caught someone approaching my driveway at 2 in the morning. I was asleep when it happened, but the motion detection alert woke me up. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed, my heart racing. The footage showed a figure dressed in dark clothing, their face partially obscured by a hood. They walked directly to one of my stakes and started trying to pull it out of the ground. I immediately called the police, then went to my front window to see if the person was still there. By the time I got downstairs, the person was gone, but I could see that they had managed to loosen one of the stakes. Officer Brewer arrived within 10 minutes, and I showed him the camera footage. Even with the poor lighting and the hood, there was something familiar about the person's build and gait. "You recognize them?" Officer Brewer asked. "I think so, but I'm not sure," I said. I watched the footage again, focusing on the way the person moved. Then it clicked. "I think that's Patricia Hendricks." Officer Brewer raised an eyebrow. "The HOA woman you told me about." "Yeah. The way she walks, the height it matches, and she's the only one with a motive." "The footage isn't clear enough for a positive ID," Officer Brewer said, "but I can pay her a visit and ask some questions. If nothing else, it might scare her off." I gave Officer Brewer Patricia's address, which I had gotten from the HOA directory. He promised to follow up the next day. I went back to bed but barely slept, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. How could someone be this petty and vindictive over driveway markers? The next afternoon, Officer Brewer called me. "I spoke with Miss Hendricks this morning," he said. "She denied being anywhere near your property last night. She claims she was home alone all evening." "Did you show her the footage?" "I did. She said it could be anyone and that you were harassing her by accusing her without proof. However, I made it very clear that if anyone is caught tampering with your property again, they will be arrested and charged. I think the message got through." I thanked Officer Brewer and hung up feeling frustrated. I was certain it was Patricia on that footage, but without a clear image of her face, there was no way to prove it. I decided to take additional precautions. I installed better lighting around my driveway and added more cameras with higher resolution. I also made sure to park my car where it had a clear view of the stakes, creating an additional obstacle for anyone who might try to mess with them. A week passed without incident. I received the promised letter from Gary, officially stating that the violation had been dropped and all fines had been cleared from my account. The letter also included a formal apology from the board and a copy of the new covenant enforcement procedures, which included mandatory consultation with relevant county authorities before issuing violations related to safety equipment. I was starting to think the nightmare was finally over when Derek called me one evening, his voice tight with anger. "Carter, you need to hear this," he said. "I just got back from the grocery store and I ran into Patricia in the parking lot. She started going off about how you've ruined the neighborhood and destroyed property values. Then she said something really concerning." "What did she say?" She said, and I quote, "People like Carter Lawson need to learn that there are consequences for making trouble." Then she got in her car and drove off. "Carter, I think she might try something else." My stomach nodded. Did she threaten me specifically? It was vague, but the implication was clear. She's not over this and she's looking for payback. I thanked Derek for the warning and immediately forwarded the information to Officer Brewer and Jennifer. Jennifer advised me to document everything and consider getting a restraining order if Patricia made any direct threats. Officer Brewer said he would increase patrols in my area and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how a simple decision to install safety equipment had spiraled into this paranoid nightmare. I had done nothing wrong, and yet I was the one losing sleep and constantly looking over my shoulder. The next morning was a Saturday, and I decided to spend the day catching up on yard work. The weather had turned cold but dry, perfect for raking the last of the fallen leaves and doing some general cleanup. I was working in my front yard when a silver sedan pulled up and parked across the street. I did not recognize the car, and I watched warily as a woman in her 30s stepped out. She was dressed professionally and carried a small notebook. "Excuse me, are you Carter Lawson?" she called out. "Who's asking?" She walked across the street and extended her hand. "My name is Rachel Torres. I'm a reporter with the Monument Herald. I'm doing a story on HOA overreach in El Paso County, and your case came to my attention through some public records requests. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions." I was surprised but also intrigued. "How did you find out about this?" "The police report you filed about the theft, and I also obtained copies of the county's safety letters through a Freedom of Information request. Your situation is exactly the kind of thing I've been investigating. Homeowners being bullied by their HOAs over reasonable and sometimes legally required property maintenance." I invited Rachel inside, and we sat at my kitchen table. She asked detailed questions about the timeline of events, the hearing with the HOA board, and the subsequent theft and harassment. I showed her the security camera footage and the letters from both the county and the HOA. Rachel took copious notes and asked if she could take some photos of the stakes and my property. "This is a great story," Rachel said as she was leaving. "It really illustrates how some HOAs have lost sight of their purpose and become more about control than community. I'll send you a draft before it goes to print, just to make sure I've got all the facts straight." The article ran the following Thursday on the front page of the local section. It was titled, "Homeowners Battle with HOA Over Required Safety Equipment Highlights Growing Tensions." Rachel had done an excellent job laying out the facts and including quotes from Miguel Santos at the county and from Jennifer about the legal issues. She also included a brief statement from Gary, who emphasized that the HOA was implementing reforms and had dropped the violation. Notably, Patricia had declined to comment. The article generated immediate attention. I received calls and emails from other homeowners in Meadowbrook Estates and surrounding neighborhoods, many of them sharing their own horror stories about dealing with overzealous HOAs. Several people thanked me for standing up to Patricia and said they felt empowered to push back against unfair violations they had received. The story also caught the attention of a local television station. A producer reached out and asked if I would be willing to do an on-camera interview for a segment they were doing on HOA disputes. I was hesitant at first, worried about further antagonizing Patricia, but Jennifer encouraged me to do it. The more public this becomes, the less likely she is to try anything else, Jennifer said. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. It was only about 5 minutes long, but it effectively summarized the situation and included comments from county officials about the importance of driveway markers in winter safety. The segment ended with the reporter standing in front of my house, the reflective stakes clearly visible in the shot, while she talked about the need for HOAs to balance community standards with common sense and legal requirements. I thought that would finally be the end of it. But Patricia Hendricks was nothing if not persistent. 2 weeks after the TV segment aired, I was at work when I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Carter Lawson?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Detective Sarah Mitchell with the Monument Police Department. I need to speak with you about an incident involving Patricia Hendricks. Are you available to come to the station this afternoon?" My heart started racing. "What kind of incident?" "I'd rather discuss it in person if possible. It's important." I told her I could be there in an hour and immediately called Jennifer to let her know what was happening. She offered to meet me at the police station, and I gratefully accepted. Jennifer was waiting in the parking lot when I arrived. We went inside together and were directed to a small conference room where Detective Mitchell was waiting. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and a serious demeanor. She shook both our hands and gestured for us to sit. "Thank you for coming in," Detective Mitchell said. "I want to ask you some questions about your interactions with Patricia Hendricks and the HOA dispute you've been involved in." "Okay," I said cautiously. "What's this about?" Detective Mitchell opened a folder and pulled out several photographs. "Last night, someone vandalized the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center. They spray-painted profanity on the walls and smashed several windows. We have surveillance footage showing a vehicle matching the description of your truck in the vicinity around the time of the vandalism." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "What? I didn't vandalize anything. I was home last night. Can anyone verify that? I live alone, but I have security cameras on my property that run 24/7. They'll show that my truck never left my driveway." Detective Mitchell nodded. "I'd like to get a copy of that footage. I also need to ask, has Patricia Hendricks made any threats or accusations against you recently?" "Not directly to me, but my neighbor Derek Morrison told me she was saying some concerning things about me in public." "Why?" "Because Patricia Hendricks is the one who reported the vandalism and specifically suggested that you might be responsible. She claimed you've been making threats against the HOA and that you have a vendetta against her." Jennifer leaned forward. "Detective, my client has not threatened anyone. He has been the victim of harassment and theft. Everything is documented. This sounds like a false report intended to further harass Mr. Lawson." "That's what I'm trying to determine," Detective Mitchell said. The timing of the accusation struck me as suspicious. which is why I wanted to talk to you directly rather than just showing up at your door. If you can provide footage showing your truck was at your residence all night, that will clear this up quickly. I pulled out my phone and accessed my security camera app. I showed Detective Mitchell the footage from the previous night, which clearly showed my truck parked in my driveway from sunset until the current morning. The timestamp was visible on the screen. I can send you the full files, I offered. Please do. Email them to the address on my card. Detective Mitchell looked at Jennifer. I'm going to be frank with you both. This isn't the first time Miss Hendricks has filed a questionable report. 6 months ago, she accused a neighbor of stealing her mail, but it turned out she had simply misplaced it. We're starting to see a pattern of behavior here. Are you going to charge her with filing a false report? I asked. That depends on what else we find. I'm going to review all the surveillance footage from the community center and see if we can identify who actually did the vandalism. If it becomes clear that Miss Hendricks knowingly made a false accusation, then yes, charges could be filed. We talked for a few more minutes, and I provided Detective Mitchell with copies of all the documentation related to the HOA dispute, the theft of my stakes, and the security footage of the person tampering with my property. Jennifer also provided a written statement summarizing the legal aspects of the case. As we were leaving, Detective Mitchell said, "Mr. Lawson, I want you to know that we take false accusations very seriously. If Miss Hendricks is attempting to use law enforcement as a tool to harass you, that's a criminal offense. We'll get to the bottom of this." Jennifer and I walked out to the parking lot together. I felt shaky and angry, barely able to process what had just happened. "She tried to frame me for vandalism," I said, my voice hollow. "This is insane." "It's also illegal," Jennifer said. "If the detective determines that Patricia knowingly made a false report, she'll face criminal charges. And even if the district attorney decides not to prosecute, you have strong grounds for a civil lawsuit for defamation and harassment." "I just want this to be over," I said. "I don't want to sue anyone. I just want to live in my house and not deal with this crazy woman anymore." "I understand, but you may need to take action to protect yourself. Let's see what the investigation turns up first." Over the next few days, I felt like I was living in a fog. I went to work, came home, checked my cameras obsessively, and tried to go about my normal routine. But the stress was taking a toll. I was sleeping poorly, and I found myself constantly distracted, unable to focus on anything for more than a few minutes. Derek checked in on me regularly, bringing me coffee and just sitting with me to talk. He was furious about the false vandalism report and offered to give a statement to the police about Patricia's threatening comments. "She's gone too far," Derek said. "Everyone in the neighborhood is talking about it. People are finally seeing her for what she really is." "I just hope the police find whoever actually did the vandalism," I said, "because if they don't, there's always going to be some doubt hanging over me." A week after my meeting with Detective Mitchell, she called me again. "Mr. Lawson, I wanted to update you on the investigation." We reviewed the surveillance footage from the community center and identified the person responsible for the vandalism. It was a teenager from a neighboring subdivision. He's been arrested and confessed. He has no connection to you or the HOA dispute whatsoever. I felt a wave of relief so intense I had to sit down. "So I'm completely cleared." "Yes. We've also determined that Patricia Hendricks had no reasonable basis for accusing you. She admitted that she had no evidence connecting you to the vandalism other than what she called a strong suspicion based on the HOA dispute. I've referred the case to the district attorney's office for review. They'll decide whether to file charges for making a false report." "Thank you, Detective. I really appreciate you taking this seriously. It's my job. And Mr. Lawson, I'd recommend you consider getting a restraining order against Miss Hendricks. Her behavior toward you has been escalating, and I'm concerned it might continue. I thanked her again and immediately called Jennifer with the update. She was pleased but echoed Detective Mitchell's concerns. A restraining order might be a good idea, Jennifer said. It creates a legal boundary and makes it clear that any further contact or harassment will have serious consequences. Do you want me to file the paperwork? I thought about it for a moment. Part of me just wanted to let it go and hope that Patricia would finally leave me alone. But the rational part of my brain knew that she had already demonstrated she was willing to go to extreme lengths to retaliate against me. Better to have legal protection in place. Yes, let's do it, I said. Jennifer filed for a temporary restraining order the next day. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, Patricia was served with notice of the order and the upcoming hearing. I did not hear anything from Patricia directly, but Derek told me she had been telling neighbors that I was the one harassing her, and that the restraining order was just another example of my vendetta against the HOA. No one was buying it, though. Too many people had seen the news coverage and knew the real story. The restraining order hearing was held in El Paso County Court on a Thursday morning. Jennifer and I arrived early and waited in the hallway outside the courtroom. I was nervous, worried about facing Patricia again, but Jennifer assured me the process was straightforward. Patricia arrived a few minutes before the hearing was scheduled to start, accompanied by a lawyer I did not recognize. She looked angry and agitated, her face pinched and her movements jerky. She glared at me as she walked past, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm and guided her into the courtroom. The judge was a middle-aged man named Judge Harrison. He reviewed the paperwork and asked me to explain why I was seeking the restraining order. I gave a concise summary of the HOA dispute, the theft of my property, the security camera footage of someone tampering with my stakes, and finally, the false police report. Jennifer submitted all the supporting documentation, including statements from Detective Mitchell and Officer Brewer. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that the dispute was simply a civil matter between neighbors and that a restraining order was unnecessary. But when Judge Harrison reviewed the evidence, particularly the false police report and the security camera footage, his expression grew stern. "Miss Hendricks, did you file a police report accusing Mr. Lawson of vandalizing the community center?" Judge Harrison asked. "I had reason to believe he was involved," Patricia said defensively. "He's been making trouble for the HOA and threatening the board." "Do you have any evidence that Mr. Lawson made threats?" Patricia hesitated. "He hired a lawyer to intimidate us." "Hiring a lawyer to address a legal dispute is not a threat, Miss Hendricks. And according to the police report, you had no actual evidence connecting Mr. Lawson to the vandalism. You made an accusation based purely on personal animosity arising from a covenant dispute that, by the way, your HOA board ultimately determined you were wrong about. Is that correct?" Patricia's face turned red. "The HOA has rules for a reason. He was violating the covenants." "He was following county safety requirements," Judge Harrison said sharply. "Miss Hendricks, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your behavior toward Mr. Lawson has been inappropriate and potentially criminal. Filing a false police report is a serious offense. Trespassing on someone's property to remove or tamper with their belongings is also a crime. Mr. Lawson has presented compelling evidence that you've engaged in a pattern of harassment against him." He turned to me. "Mr. Lawson, I'm granting your request for a restraining order. Miss Hendricks is prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly. from coming within 100 yards of your residence or workplace, and from making any further reports to law enforcement regarding you, unless she has actual evidence of criminal activity. This order will remain in effect for 1 year, at which point you can request an extension if necessary. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but her lawyer leaned over and whispered something to her. She clamped her mouth shut, her jaw working. Miss Hendricks, do you understand the terms of this order? Judge Harrison asked. Yes, Patricia said through gritted teeth. If you violate this order, you will be arrested and charged with contempt of court. Do you understand that as well? Yes. Judge Harrison signed the order and handed copies to both lawyers. This hearing is concluded. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Jennifer was pleased with the outcome and told me the judge's comments about Patricia's behavior would be helpful if the district attorney decided to file criminal charges. You should be safe now, Jennifer said. If she contacts you or comes near your property, call the police immediately and she'll be arrested. I thanked Jennifer for all her work and headed home. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could actually breathe. The story of Patricia's false police report and the restraining order quickly spread through the neighborhood. Several homeowners reached out to express their support, and a few even mentioned they were considering filing their own complaints against Patricia for past harassment. The HOA board, clearly embarrassed by the ongoing negative publicity, sent out a letter to all residents announcing that they were conducting a comprehensive review of their enforcement policies and encouraging homeowners to contact the board directly if they had concerns about past violations. Gary called me a few days after the hearing. Carter, I wanted to apologize again for everything you've been through, he said. The board has voted to remove Patricia from all HOA activities permanently. She's no longer on the board, and she's been banned from attending meetings or participating in any committee work. That's good to hear, I said. Has she said anything about it? She submitted a resignation letter, but it was pretty clear she was asked to resign rather than face a formal removal vote. Her letter was full of complaints about how the board wasn't supporting her, but honestly, I think everyone is just relieved she's gone. We've already had several homeowners tell us they are happier with the new approach. I was glad the HOA was finally taking responsibility, though it felt like too little, too late. Still, I appreciated Gary's effort to make things right. December arrived, bringing with it heavy snowfall. My reflective stakes proved their worth immediately, as the snowplow drivers navigated my curved driveway without any issues. I even got a thumbs up from one driver who clearly appreciated the clear markers. I thought about how much unnecessary drama could have been avoided if Patricia had just listened to reason from the beginning. About 2 weeks into December, I got a call from Detective Mitchell. Mr. Lawson, I wanted to inform you that the district attorney has decided to file charges against Patricia Hendricks for filing a false police report. She'll be arraigned next month. I was surprised. I thought they might just drop it. Normally they might, but the DA felt that miss. Hendricks' behavior was egregious enough to warrant prosecution. Making a false report wastes law enforcement resources and can seriously damage someone's reputation. They want to send a message that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated. What's she facing? It's a misdemeanor charge, so probably a fine and possibly community service if she's convicted, but it will be on her record. I thanked Detective Mitchell for the update. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. This whole ordeal had consumed months of my life, and I was ready to move on. The arraignment happened in early January. I did not attend, but Jennifer went on my behalf since I was listed as the victim in the case. She called me afterward to report that Patricia had pleaded not guilty and the case was headed to trial. "She's fighting it?" I asked, incredulous. "Her lawyer is arguing that she made an honest mistake and genuinely believed you might have been involved in the vandalism. It's a weak defense, but she has the right to trial." The trial was set for late February. In the meantime, life slowly returned to normal. My stakes remained in place without incident, guiding the snowplows safely through each storm. I finally started sleeping through the night again, and the constant anxiety that had plagued me for months began to fade. Derek and I became closer friends through the whole ordeal, and we started getting together regularly for beers and football games. He told me that the atmosphere in the neighborhood had noticeably improved since Patricia's departure from the HOA board. "People are actually enjoying living here again," Derek said. "The new committee is way more reasonable. They're focused on actual safety and maintenance issues instead of nitpicking everyone to death." The trial took place on a cold Tuesday in late February. This time I did attend, curious to see how it would play out. The courtroom was small, and there were only a handful of people present. Patricia sat at the defense table with her lawyer, looking drawn and angry. She did not look at me when I came in. The prosecution called Detective Mitchell as their primary witness. She testified about the vandalism investigation, the surveillance footage that cleared me, and her interview with Patricia. Under questioning, Detective Mitchell explained that Patricia had admitted she had no concrete evidence connecting me to the vandalism, only her belief that I had a motive due to the HOA dispute. The prosecutor also entered into evidence the timeline of harassment, including the theft of my stakes, the security camera footage of someone tampering with my property, and the restraining order hearing transcript. The pattern of behavior was clear and damning. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she had genuinely believed I might be involved and was simply trying to help the police investigation. But under cross-examination, Patricia struggled to explain why she had specifically named me when there was no evidence pointing in my direction. "You were angry at Mr. Lawson because he challenged your authority at the HOA, correct?" the prosecutor asked. "I was concerned about covenant compliance," Patricia said stiffly. "But the HOA board ultimately determined that Mr. Lawson was right and you were wrong, didn't they?" "They made a decision I disagreed with. And shortly after that decision, someone stole items from Mr. Lawson's property. Then someone was caught on camera tampering with his property. Then you filed a police report accusing him of vandalism with no evidence." "That's quite a coincidence, isn't it?" Patricia's face flushed. "I don't know anything about anyone stealing his property. But you do admit you filed a police report naming him without any evidence." Patricia's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled it. Patricia looked trapped. "I had a suspicion," she said finally. "Based on what?" "Your anger that he successfully challenged your HOA decision." "Objection, argumentative," Patricia's lawyer said, sustained. "Move on, counselor." The trial lasted most of the day. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Patricia sat stone-faced as the verdict was read. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. At the sentencing hearing, Patricia was ordered to pay a fine of $500, perform 80 hours of community service, and write a formal letter of apology to me and to the police department. She was also placed on probation for 1 year. Patricia's lawyer requested that she be allowed to do her community service out of state, as she was planning to move to Arizona to live with her sister. The judge allowed it, and I got the sense that everyone was relieved she would be leaving Colorado. I never received the apology letter, though the prosecutor told me it had been submitted to the court. I did not really care. The important thing was that it was finally over. Spring came to Monument, and the snow melted away. I removed the stakes and stored them in my garage for next winter, confident that I would not face any interference when I put them back up in the fall. The new Architectural Review Committee even sent out a memo to all homeowners encouraging the use of driveway markers for winter safety. I ran into Gary at the grocery store in April, and he told me the HOA had seen a significant increase in homeowner satisfaction since implementing the new enforcement policies. Several people who had been considering moving had decided to stay. "You really did us a favor," Gary said. "I know it was hell for you, but it forced us to take a hard look at how we were operating. We're a better association now because of it." I appreciated the sentiment, though I would have preferred to learn that lesson without months of stress and harassment. Still, I was glad something positive had come out of the experience. As summer arrived, and I sat on my back deck watching the sunset over the Colorado hills, I reflected on the whole ordeal. It had started with something so simple and sensible, putting up reflective stakes to prevent property damage and keep people safe. But it had spiraled into a battle over control, ego, and the abuse of power. I thought about all the homeowners who had reached out to me with their own HOA horror stories. People who had been bullied and harassed over minor issues because someone on a power trip decided to enforce arbitrary rules. I had been fortunate to have the resources and support to fight back, but not everyone was in that position. The experience had taught me the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult and stressful. It had also shown me that sometimes the people who seek power in small ways are the ones least equipped to handle it responsibly. Patricia had wanted control over the neighborhood, but in the end, her need for control had destroyed her position and reputation. I also learned that sunlight really is the best disinfectant, as Jennifer had said. The moment the media got involved and the story became public, the dynamics shifted. Patricia could no longer operate in the shadows, and the HOA board could no longer ignore the problems with her leadership. Transparency had been key to resolving the situation. Derek came over for a barbecue in late June, and we sat around my fire pit as the evening cooled down. We talked about everything that had happened, and Derek raised his beer in a toast. "To standing up to crazy HOA board members," he said with a grin. "And to county safety requirements," I added. We clinked bottles and laughed. It felt good to laugh about it, to finally be at a point where the whole mess was behind me and I could see the humor in the absurdity of it all. Who gets into a months-long legal battle over driveway markers? But that was exactly what had happened, and I had come out the other side stronger and more confident. The neighborhood settled into a peaceful rhythm through the summer and into the fall. When October arrived and the weather started to turn, I pulled the stakes out of my garage and installed them along my driveway again. This time, no violation notices appeared in my mailbox. No one tampered with my property. The stakes simply did their job, marking the boundaries of my driveway so the snowplow drivers would know where to plow when winter arrived. I stood at my front window on the first snowy morning of the season, watching a snowplow carefully navigate the curve of Ridgeview Drive. The driver kept his blade well clear of my property line, guided by the bright orange reflective markers. It was exactly what I had hoped would happen when I first installed them a year ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Stakes still up. No HOA drama. Life is good." I smiled and texted back. Life is good. And it was. I had fought for something that was right and necessary, and I had won. I had helped push back against a petty tyrant, and in doing so had made life better not just for myself but for everyone in Meadowbrook Estates. The HOA was functioning more reasonably. homeowners felt more secure, and the neighborhood was a genuinely pleasant place to live. Sometimes, I wondered what Patricia was doing in Arizona, whether she had learned anything from the experience, or whether she was already finding new ways to meddle in other people's lives. But mostly, I did not think about her at all. She had taken up enough of my time and mental energy. I was done giving her any more. As winter deepened and the snow continued to fall, my reflective stakes stood tall and bright, doing exactly what they were designed to do. They kept my property safe, they helped the snowplow drivers do their jobs, and they stood as a small monument to the principle that common sense and safety should always trump arbitrary rules and petty tyranny. I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates looking for a nice, quiet place to call home. It had taken a fight to actually make it that, but now it truly was. Every time I pulled into my driveway and saw those stakes marking the way, I felt a sense of satisfaction and pride. Not because I had defeated Patricia Hendricks, but because I had stood up for what was right and refused to be bullied into compromising on safety. The stakes would come down again in the spring and go back up next fall, and they would continue to do so for as many winters as I lived in this house. And every time I installed them, I would remember this experience and smile, knowing that sometimes the smallest battles can teach the biggest lessons about courage, persistence, and the importance of standing your ground when you know you are right.